I wanted to do a quick video on Gennady Golovkin. I wanted to split this down into two parts. Firstly, a brief bit about his fight last night with Curtis Stevens, and secondly, and more importantly, a bit of an analysis on who he should fight next and why. Now, touching briefly on last night, it wasn't really a fight that got the juices flowing heavily at this end. I wasn't overly excited about it. I thought after the fight with Matthew Macklin and after the sort of praise that ensued from that fight, it was really time for Golovkin to take a step up against a sort of well-renowned opponent. Now, Curtis Stevens, he's respectable, solid, okay, but he's not really regarded as a top-level middleweight. Nobody really gave him a chance or expected him to win, and the fight sort of went as expected. Golovkin won reasonably convincingly. Golovkin put Stevens down in the second with quite a heavy knockdown. I must admit, I thought the fight would be over at that point, and Stevens did very well to regain composure, get back up and work his way back into the fight. In many ways, he showed quite a human side to Golovkin. Golovkin was never fazed by Stevens, but took multiple shots. Stevens was able to land on him. Golovkin was not able to land a devastating knockout on Stevens like he'd done previously against Macklin. Stevens was pulled out by his corner. He wasn't never going to win, but he was pulled out from his corner after the 8th round. Probably the right decision. Golovkin goes marching on. An expected result. I think for me the key thing here is who he fights next. Like Macklin, he's known in the boxing community as is Curtis Stevens, but what Golovkin really needs to do is take on an opponent who's going to make him known amongst the general public rather than just the boxing hardcore. He's going up and up and up on the pound for pound list, but the average man on the street still hasn't heard of him and still doesn't know much about him. So I think we really need to be, looking at a big name opponent for him next, and not somebody who's certainly a league above Macklin and Stevens in terms of their ranking and how well they're known. This is why I was quite disappointed to hear that Golovkin's next fight is going to be February the 1st in Monte Carlo. The reason behind that is that will rule many of the big name opponents out. For a start, you have Chavez Jr., obviously a massive name out in the States, in Mexico, a really sort of winnable fight for Golovkin. We're looking at a guy here who's been very unimpressive in his last fight against Vera, but it would be a huge name for Golovkin and it would be a big scalp for him to take. Now, obviously Chavez Jr. won't be fighting on February because he's already agreed a rematch with Vera, which would rule him out. Now, the chance of, Sergio Martinez, who's the other sort of well-regarded champ at middleweight, coming over to Monte Carlo to fight February the 1st are pretty much non-existent. There was also, before the fight last night, talk of, Golovkin looking at moving weight. So there was talk about maybe him moving down to light middleweight to try and get involved in the Mayweather scene. There was talk of him moving up to try and get involved with Carl Froch or Andre Ward. These are all sort of mouth-watering fights. They're all PPV, pay-per-view level fights. They're all fights which would get him highly up in the public mind and up in the sort of pound-for-pound rankings. Now, the fact that he's fighting on February the 1st means that he's not going to be getting these guys. I mean, let's be realistic here. Carl Froch, Andre Ward, Miguel Cotto, Canelo Alvarez, Floyd Mayweather, Chavez Jr., they are not going to be turning up to fight in Monte Carlo. They haven't been given enough notice. Gennady Golovkin really needs to fight on these guys' terms. He needs to come to Nottingham to fight Froch. He needs to go out to the States to fight Ward. The fact that he's done this suggests he will be fighting another opponent of the ilk of Macklin and Stevens. Now, one name that's been mentioned a lot today in the press is Martin Murray, who's the #1 contender. Obviously, Murray has a fight coming up, undercard fight, a very winnable fight for him, and he's #1 ranked by the WBA, who is the sanctioning body that Golovkin is now champion of. For me, Murray versus Golovkin doesn't hold, much excitement. Obviously, Murray, similar level, sort of Matthew Macklin. You'd expect Golovkin to win. You'd expect Golovkin to win with a bit in hand. and Murray isn't one of these names, a massive public figure who's going to get himself up and up and up and, and get Golovkin rated highly in the public eye. For me, Golovkin needs to take on a big name. Now, there's so many options. At middleweight, Alvarez will probably be going up to middleweight. He could fight Alvarez, he could fight Canelo, he could try and fight Quinlan or Sergio Martinez, the other champions. As he mentioned when he was being interviewed post-fight yesterday, he could drop to light middleweight for a fight with Alvarez or for a fight with Floyd Mayweather. Well, obviously, it's not as simple as getting a Mayweather fight. I do appreciate that, but he could try and put himself in the mix. There's massive, massive money for him if he moved up, Frotz, Ward, There's huge options that should be available to Golovkin, whether he wants to stay at his current weight, whether he wants to go down, whether he wants to move up. And I think that if he, takes another fight against a sort of fringe contender in the middleweight division, sort of top 15, that sort of level, it's not really going to raise his profile. It's not going to lead to big excitement, etc. And I think by organising this fight on February the 1st and in Monte Carlo, he's ruled out so many of the big names and so much of the big money he could have brought in. It's quite disappointing, really. I think Martin Murray, he's been touted in the press there. I think he is a likely opponent. I think he'll come through his next fight with ease, probably score a stoppage, which will look impressive, and then he'll probably get the fight against Golovkin, and there's not going to be people queuing around the block to see that, to be honest, because it's a fight that everybody knows Golovkin should win, and should win with a bit in hand. So that's my thoughts. Golovkin moves on. Good win yesterday, but uninspiring. Didn't look as devastating as he did against Macklin, and I think it's really time for him to do something a bit different, or else he risks being this figure that's known in the boxing fraternity, but he needs to be known outside of that, really. And there's so many big fights around him. Let's see him step up and take one now. I'd be really interested to hear what people's thoughts are on the next opponent. Firstly, do they agree with me that Murray is looking like the most likely? And secondly, who would be the opponent you'd most like to see? I mean, do you think you'd most like to stay at his current rate or move up? Like, what sort of names would you throw into the mix? Who do you think you could get out to Monte Carlo? I'd be really interested to hear sort of comments or feedback if you want to leave them below. Thanks very much.